Have you ever thought about what life was really like for slaves in ancient Greece? You might think of them as just victims of a cruel system, but the truth is far more complicated and shocking than you realize. In this video, you'll uncover the hidden complexities of ancient Greek slavery that challenge conventional views. Slavery was common in ancient Greece and part of everyday life. What exactly does slavery look like in ancient Greece? Many people think all slaves were treated the same, but that's not true. Slaves came from different backgrounds and cultures, including war captives and debtors. Understanding these differences helps explain the social structure of Greek society, revealing a system much more intricate than one might assume. Did you know there were different types of slaves in ancient Greece? There were domestic slaves who worked in homes and agricultural slaves who worked on farms. Some slaves were highly skilled, like teachers or craftsmen, and had more rights than others. Conversely, some worked in mines under brutal conditions, leading to a short life expectancy. Knowing these roles helps us see how slavery functioned in various aspects of life and why it was so vital to the economy. How did slavery impact the daily lives of free citizens? Slavery allowed many Greek citizens to pursue education and philosophy, creating a divide between social classes. You may think slavery was purely negative, but it supported economic growth, and the existence of slaves created a class system that defined social interactions. This dynamic shaped the culture and priorities of ancient Greek city-states in ways that are often overlooked. What rights did slaves actually have in ancient Greece? Surprisingly, some slaves could own property or buy their freedom under certain conditions. They could have personal relationships, and some were even granted privileges. Many slaves fought for their freedom, showing resilience and determination. Understanding these aspects reveals a more nuanced view of their lives and the complexities of human relationships during this time. Did you know slavery was a backbone of the Greek economy? Slaves worked in agriculture, producing food that supported the economy. They also contributed to craftsmanship and trade, helping Greece flourish. Thus, reliance on slavery raised questions about ethical practices in business, leading to a complex relationship between morality and economy that still echoes in today's discussions. How did war influence the practice of slavery in ancient Greece? Many slaves were captured during wars, dramatically changing the landscape of slavery. Victorious armies often enslaved conquered peoples, expanding their power. This practice created cycles of violence and oppression that were hard to break. Exploring these connections helps us understand the motivations behind war and the ramifications it had on society. How did Greek philosophers view slavery? Philosophers like Aristotle had complicated views on slavery, seeing it as a natural part of life. You might think philosophers would reject slavery entirely, but many accepted it as a societal norm. These beliefs influenced societal norms and justified the existence of slavery, offering insight into the philosophical underpinnings of the time that shaped cultural values. Were there any significant revolts against slavery in ancient Greece? While not as frequent as in other societies, there were notable slave revolts, including one led by Spartacus. These revolts were fueled by poor treatment and a desperate desire for freedom. Resistance took many forms, from open rebellion to subtle sabotage, showcasing the resilience and determination of those who fought against their circumstances. What impact did ancient Greek slavery have on future societies? The system influenced Roman slavery and shaped concepts of labor throughout history. Many ideas about citizenship and human rights originated from these practices, creating a legacy that continues to resonate today. Understanding this legacy helps us see the lasting effects of slavery on culture and social structures. What common myths about ancient Greek slavery should be debunked? Many people think all slaves were treated equally poorly, which is misleading. Slaves had varying experiences based on their roles, skills, and owners, and the idea that all slaves wanted to escape is another misconception. Dissecting these myths creates a clearer picture of life for slaves, illuminating the complexities of their existence. How did women experience slavery differently than men? Many female slaves worked in domestic settings and faced unique challenges compared to their male counterparts. Their roles often included child-rearing, cooking, and cleaning, and some women had the opportunity to rise in status through their relationships. Understanding their experiences sheds light on gender dynamics within slavery, offering a fuller picture of the societal structure. How is slavery portrayed? Many artworks depict the lives of slaves, offering glimpses into their daily experiences. Literature often reflected societal views on slavery, influencing public perception and reinforcing stereotypes. Recognizing these representations helps us see how culture shaped views of slavery, highlighting the ongoing dialogue about humanity and morality. Did slaves in ancient Greece have access to education? Some slaves, particularly those in wealthy households, received education, which was not common in all societies. Educated slaves often became teachers or assistants, showing their potential to rise above their circumstances. This access created opportunities for mobility and changing their status, illustrating that not all aspects of slavery were wholly oppressive. What lessons can we learn from ancient Greek slavery today? Understanding historical practices can inform discussions on modern slavery and labor rights. Many issues related to human rights stem from these ancient systems, which can offer insight into contemporary struggles for equality and justice. Recognizing these connections helps create a more informed society that values freedom and human rights. How does ancient Greek slavery compare to other cultures? Slavery existed in various forms across different civilizations, each with unique practices and implications. Comparing these systems helps highlight differences and similarities, revealing how cultures influenced each other in their treatment of slaves. This broader perspective enriches your understanding of human history and the persistent issue of slavery. What ethical questions arise from studying ancient Greek slavery? Engaging with the morality of slavery challenges our understanding of justice and equity. You may grapple with the implications of benefiting from a system built on oppression, leading to difficult conversations about historical accountability. Addressing these dilemmas is crucial for developing a nuanced view of history that encourages empathy and understanding. What can we learn from individual slave narratives? Personal stories provide insight into the emotional and psychological impacts of slavery, helping to humanize historical figures often viewed only as statistics. They reveal the struggles, resilience, and hopes of those who lived through this dark chapter in history. Understanding individual experiences creates empathy and connection to the past, reinforcing the need for remembrance and reflection. How has ancient Greek slavery influenced modern society? The values and beliefs surrounding slavery continue to impact social structures today. Recognizing these connections can inform current debates about labor rights, human trafficking, and inequality. You'll explore how history shapes our understanding of justice and equity, highlighting the importance of learning from the past to create a better future. Did you know that slavery was not only common, but a fundamental part of life in ancient Greece? And many people imagine slaves as mere victims of a cruel system, but the truth is much more nuanced and revealing. In ancient Greece, the concept of slavery was intertwined with society's fabric, influencing everything from economics to culture. By the end of this video, you'll have a deeper understanding of how slavery worked, who the slaves were, and why this aspect of history is far more complex than you might have thought. Slavery in ancient Greece was everywhere, forming the backbone of daily life. What exactly does slavery look like in this context? Contrary to popular belief, not all slaves were treated equally. In fact, their experiences varied significantly based on numerous factors. Some slaves were captured in war, while others fell into slavery due to debt. Understanding these different paths helps clarify the social structure of Greek society, where status and power dynamics were constantly shifting. Did you know that some slaves could even hold jobs as teachers or craftsmen? This complexity will challenge your preconceived notions about what it meant to be a slave in ancient Greece. Did you know there were different types of slaves in ancient Greece? This is where the story becomes even more intriguing. For instance, there were domestic slaves who worked in homes and agricultural slaves who toiled on farms. But it doesn't stop there. Some slaves were highly skilled and educated, enjoying more rights than their counterparts. In stark contrast, others faced brutal conditions, especially those who worked in the mines. By delving into these roles, we can better understand how slavery functioned in various aspects of life. Think about it. How could one person's status as a slave vary so greatly from another's, even in the same society? How did slavery impact the daily lives of free citizens? You might be surprised to learn that slavery enabled many Greek citizens to engage in education, philosophy, and the arts. It created a unique societal dynamic that allowed citizens to thrive while their slaves performed labor-intensive tasks. Many people assume that slavery brought only negative outcomes, but it was in fact a driver of economic growth. This reliance on slaves not only defined social classes, but also influenced the cultural landscape of ancient Greek city-states. What would our understanding of Greek culture be without this context? What rights did slaves actually have in ancient Greece? Surprisingly, some slaves were able to own property or buy their freedom, given the right circumstances. This knowledge complicates the narrative that all slaves were mere property without autonomy. Many could even forge personal relationships, some gaining privileges through their loyalty or skill. Others fought desperately for their freedom, displaying remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. By exploring these aspects, you'll uncover a more nuanced perspective of what life was like for slaves in ancient Greece. Did you know that slavery was a backbone of the Greek economy? This point might shock you. Slaves played vital roles in agriculture, producing essential food that sustained the economy. They didn't just work the fields. They were also involved in craftsmanship and trade, making significant contributions to the flourishing of Greek society. This reliance on slavery raises ethical questions about business practices of the time. How does a society reconcile economic prosperity with the morality of slavery? This tension is essential to understanding the complexities of ancient economics. How did war influence the practice of slavery in ancient Greece? Many of the slaves in Greek households were captured during conflicts, drastically changing the landscape of slavery. Victorious armies often enslaved conquered peoples, using them to expand their power. This cycle of violence perpetuated an oppressive system that was hard to break. By examining these connections, you'll gain insights into how war and slavery were intertwined, revealing motivations that fueled centuries of conflict. How did Greek philosophers view slavery? It's interesting to note that philosophers like Aristotle had complicated views, seeing slavery as a natural part of life. You might expect philosophers to wholly reject such a system, but many accepted it as a societal norm. These philosophical beliefs played a crucial role in shaping societal norms and and justifying the institution of slavery. Understanding these perspectives gives us a glimpse into the mindset of the time, revealing how deeply embedded these views were in the culture. Were there significant revolts against slavery in ancient Greece? While less common compared to other societies, notable slave revolts did occur, such as the one led by Spartacus. These revolts were fueled by poor treatment and a desperate desire for freedom, challenging the notion that all slaves were passive. Resistance took various forms, from outright rebellion to subtle acts of defiance. Acknowledging these instances of resistance forces us to reconsider the dynamics of power and oppression in ancient societies. But did ancient Greek slavery have on future societies? The influence of this system reached far beyond its time. It shaped Roman slavery and contributed to ideas about citizenship and human rights that emerged later. This historical legacy is critical for understanding contemporary issues related to slavery and labor rights. By grasping the implications of ancient practices, you'll recognize the lasting effects of slavery on culture and social norms. What myths about ancient Greek slavery need to be debunked? Many believe that all slaves were treated equally poorly, but this is misleading. The reality is that slaves had varying experiences based on their roles, skills, and the character of their owners. The stereotype that all slaves wanted to escape is another common misconception. Dissecting these myths will help create a clearer picture of life for slaves, challenging you to rethink your assumptions. How did women experience slavery differently than men? Female slaves often worked in domestic roles and faced unique challenges compared to their male counterparts. Their responsibilities included child-rearing, cooking, and cleaning. In some cases, women could rise in status through relationships with their owners. This exploration of gender dynamics within slavery reveals much about the complex social fabric of ancient Greece. How is slavery portrayed in ancient Greek art and literature? Artworks from this period provide glimpses into the daily lives of slaves, revealing how society viewed them. Literature also reflected the prevailing attitudes towards slavery, shaping public perception. Thus, Greek art representations helps us understand the societal norms of the time and their impact on contemporary views about slavery and human dignity. Did slaves in ancient Greece have access to education? Surprisingly, some slaves, especially those in wealthy households, received education, which was not common in other societies. Educated slaves could become teachers or assistants, illustrating their potential to change their status. Meaning the education of slaves adds complexity to our understanding of social class and mobility in ancient Greek society. What lessons can we draw from ancient Greek slavery today? Understanding these historical practices informs current discussions on modern slavery and labor rights. Many issues related to human rights have roots in ancient systems of oppression. You can find parallels between past and present struggles for equality and justice, making it crucial to recognize these connections to foster a more informed society. How does ancient Greek slavery compare to other cultures? Slavery took different forms across various civilizations, each with unique practices. Comparing these systems helps to highlight both differences and similarities, deepening your understanding of how cultures influenced one another. This broader perspective enriches your comprehension of human history and the persistent issues surrounding slavery. What ethical questions arise from studying ancient Greek slavery? Engaging with the morality of slavery challenges your understanding of justice and equity. You may find yourself grappling with the implications of benefiting from a system built on oppression. Addressing these ethical dilemmas is vital for developing a nuanced view of history that encourages empathy and critical thinking. What can we learn from individual slave narratives? Personal stories reveal the emotional and psychological impacts of slavery, helping to humanize historical figures often seen only as statistics. These narratives offer insights into the struggles and resilience of those who lived through this era. Understanding these individual experiences fosters empathy and connection to the past, reminding us of the importance of freedom and justice. How has ancient Greek slavery influenced modern society? The values and beliefs surrounding slavery continue to affect social structures today. Recognizing these connections can inform current debates about labor rights and human dignity. You'll explore how history shapes our understanding of justice and equity, revealing the importance of learning from the past to create a better future. Did you know that slavery was a cornerstone of ancient Greek society, shaping its economy, culture, and social structure? You might think of slavery solely as a harsh reality for its victims, but there's so much more to the story. The truth about how slavery worked in ancient Greece is not only complex, but also reveals surprising insights into the lives of both slaves and free citizens. In this section, we'll explore how the institution of slavery allowed many Greek citizens to flourish while simultaneously defining the very fabric of their society. Slavery in ancient Greece had a profound impact on the daily lives of free citizens. You might wonder, how did this system support the pursuit of education and philosophy among the elite? The answer lies in the labor that slaves performed, which freed up time for citizens to engage in intellectual pursuits. In fact, many famous philosophers, such as Socrates and Plato, depended on slaves to manage their households and farms, allowing them to devote their lives to thought and discourse. This interdependence reveals a society where intellectual achievement was often built on the backs of those who were enslaved. You may think that slavery was purely a negative aspect of society, society, but it actually contributed to significant economic growth in ancient Greece. The presence of slaves enabled landowners to cultivate larger areas of land, ultimately increasing agricultural output. This economic boom allowed for the rise of city-states, fostering advancements in arts, culture, and politics. It's fascinating to consider how the economic structure of ancient Greece was intricately linked to its slave economy, challenging the simplistic narrative of slavery as a wholly oppressive system. The existence of slaves created a class system that defined social interactions and expectations. Free citizens often viewed themselves as superior, leading to a society deeply stratified by status. This dynamic shaped everything from political power to personal relationships, influencing how individuals interacted within their communities. While the labor provided by slaves supported the economy, it also reinforced social hierarchies that persisted for generations. How did these hierarchies influence the culture and values of ancient Greece? This question invites us to consider the broader implications of slavery on societal norms. Interestingly, not all slaves were treated equally. Their experiences varied based on their roles and skills. Some slaves worked in households, performing domestic tasks, while others toiled in the fields or mines. This differentiation had significant consequences on their quality of life and the opportunities available to them. For instance, domestic slaves often had better living conditions and more personal agency than those forced to work in grueling agricultural settings. This distinction complicates our understanding of slavery, revealing a spectrum of experiences that challenges the idea of a monolithic slave existence. In conclusion, understanding how slavery functioned in ancient Greek society is essential for grasping the complexities of this era. Slavery was not merely a backdrop to the lives of the free, but a crucial element that enabled economic growth, social stratification, and cultural achievements. By examining these interconnections, you'll gain insights into the daily lives of both slaves and free citizens, revealing a society shaped by contradictions and interdependencies. As we continue to explore this topic, keep in mind that the legacies of ancient Greek slavery still resonate today, reminding us of the intricate tapestry of human history and the importance of recognizing all voices within it. What you think you know about ancient Greek slavery is about to be turned on its head. Stay tuned for our next section, where we'll delve into the different types of slaves in ancient Greece and uncover the surprising roles they played in society. What rights did slaves actually have in ancient Greece? You might think that slaves had no rights at all, but that's not entirely true. Surprisingly, some slaves had the ability to own property or even buy their freedom under specific conditions. This nuance paints a different picture of slavery than what many expect. Let's dive into this complex aspect of ancient life, where understanding the rights and freedoms of slaves can challenge our perceptions of their existence. In ancient Greece, some slaves could indeed own property. This might sound shocking, but imagine a slave who, after years of hard work and saving, could purchase a small piece of land or even their own freedom. These opportunities were not common for all slaves, but they did exist for those fortunate enough to be in a more favorable situation. While many people think all slaves were completely powerless, this illustrates that some had a degree of agency, even if limited. Personal relationships were another important aspect of a slave's life. Many slaves developed strong bonds with their owners and families, sometimes even becoming integral members of the household. This could lead to privileges that other slaves did not have. For instance, a trusted domestic slave might have a better quality of life compared to one who worked in harsh conditions on a farm or in a mine. This differentiation in treatment highlights the varied experiences within slavery, which often contradicts the stereotype of a uniformly brutal existence. Another surprising fact is that many slaves actively fought for their freedom. Some even staged revolts or attempted to escape, displaying remarkable resilience and determination. While you might assume that slaves were passive victims, the reality is that many sought to change their circumstances. This resistance shows a level of agency that challenges traditional views of slavery. Imagine the courage it took to rise against an oppressive system, knowing the severe consequences that could follow. Understanding these rights and freedoms reveals a more nuanced view of the lives of slaves in ancient Greece. It prompts us to rethink the simplistic narrative of total subjugation and offers insight into the social dynamics of the time. Slavery was not just a binary system of oppressor and oppressed. It was complex, with slaves sometimes enjoying rights that could lead to significant life changes. Reflecting on this complexity, we can see how the roles and rights of slaves contributed to the larger social fabric of ancient Greece. You might be surprised to learn that these nuances shaped not only the lives of slaves, but also the citizens who depended on them. The interactions between slaves and their owners create a tapestry of social relationships that define the culture of the time. As we continue to explore the various aspects of slavery in ancient Greece, keep in mind that the legacy of these practices influences how we understand freedom and human rights today. The rights and privileges, however limited, that some slaves experienced remind us that history is not always black and white. In our next section, we will examine the role of slavery in the economy of ancient Greece and uncover how intertwined it was with the development of the society we study today. Prepare to be surprised by the critical role slaves played in economic growth, which in many ways laid the foundation for Greek prosperity. Did you know that slavery was a backbone backbone of the ancient Greek economy. Most people think of slavery as purely a negative institution, but it played a crucial role in the development and success of Greek society. This role not only shaped the economy, but also the social fabric of the time. Understanding this intricate relationship is vital, as it allows us to explore how ancient practices resonate in our discussions about labor and ethics today. In ancient Greece, slaves were primarily engaged in agriculture, producing food that was essential for the community. Picture vast fields tended by skilled agricultural slaves, ensuring that the city-states had enough grain to feed their populations. This work was labor-intensive and required knowledge of the land and crops, which many slaves possessed. The very survival of the Greek city-states hinged on the agricultural output facilitated by slave labor. Without this foundation, the bustling life of Athens or Sparta would have faltered. You may be surprised to learn that slaves were also involved in craftsmanship and trade. Many were skilled artisans, creating pottery, furniture, and textiles. This work not only showcased their talents, but also contributed significantly to the economy. Wealthy citizens relied on skilled slaves to produce high-quality goods, leading to a flourishing marketplace. Imagine the vibrant markets filled with beautifully crafted items, all thanks to the labor of enslaved individuals. This interconnectedness between slaves and economic success is often overlooked, yet it is fundamental to understanding the ancient Greek economy. However, this reliance on slavery also raises important ethical questions. Most people think that economic growth should come from fair labor practices, but in ancient Greece, this was not the case. The prosperity gained from slave labor highlighted the moral dilemmas faced by Greek citizens. They enjoyed the benefits of a thriving economy, yet it was built on the suffering of others. This contradiction challenges our modern views on ethics in business and labor practices. Would the Greeks have thrived as they did if they had relied solely on free labor? The answer remains complex. Examining the role of slavery in the economy also brings to light the class structure of ancient Greece. The existence of slaves created a distinct hierarchy. Free citizens could pursue education and philosophy because their labor was done by enslaved people. Imagine a world where the upper class engaged in intellectual discussions while the lower class toiled in the fields and workshops. This dynamic shaped social interactions and priorities in the city-states. Slavery was not just an economic system. It was a social institution that defined life in ancient Greece. Let's also consider how the contributions of slaves affected the culture of ancient Greece. The abundance of food and goods allowed citizens to focus on art, literature, and philosophy. While the elite enjoyed their privileges, it was the hard work of slaves that enabled such cultural advancements. Many people might not realize that the works of great philosophers and artists were made possible by a system that relied on the exploitation of others. This raises an uncomfortable truth about the foundations of culture and achievement throughout history. This intricate relationship between slavery and the economy reminds us of the importance of understanding history as a complex web of social, ethical, and economic factors. The legacy of ancient Greek slavery does not only inform our understanding of the past, it challenges us to think critically about how we view labor and ethics in our own society today. As we continue to explore the various aspects of slavery in ancient Greece, keep in mind that these discussions are not merely historical. They resonate in contemporary debates about labor practices and human rights. In our next section, we will delve into how warfare influenced the practice of slavery in ancient Greece. Prepare to uncover the connections between conquest, power, and the expansion of slavery that shaped the landscape of ancient societies. You might be surprised at how deeply intertwined these elements are, and how they contributed to the cycles of oppression that were hard to break. Did you know that war played a significant role in shaping the landscape of slavery in ancient Greece? Most people think of slavery as a static institution, but its roots are deeply intertwined with the conquests and conflicts of the era. When we think of the Athenian and Spartan warriors, we often picture brave men on the battlefield. However, what many overlook is that for every soldier, there were countless slaves who endured the aftermath of warfare, dramatically altering their lives forever. War was a catalyst for slavery in ancient Greece. Victorious armies often enslaved conquered peoples, expanding their reach and influence. This practice created cycles of violence that were not only hard to break, but also significantly affected the social dynamics of Greek city-states. Imagine a city-state that just won a battle, celebrating their victory. Yet in the shadows of this triumph, families are being torn apart as their members are captured and forced into servitude. This cycle of war and slavery often perpetuated a sense of normalcy around the practice, desensitizing society to the brutal reality of the enslaved. You might be surprised to learn that many of the slaves in ancient Greece were war captives. These individuals came from various regions, each with unique backgrounds and cultures. For instance, after a successful campaign, a victorious army might round up the defeated enemy citizens and bring them back as slaves. This practice didn't just impact the captured individuals, it reshaped the identity of the city-state that claimed them. The expansion of slavery in this manner allowed city-states to thrive economically, as they could now use their new slaves for agricultural work, crafts, and domestic duties. However, the repercussions of this reliance on slave labor were profound. Most people think that slaves simply accepted their fate, but the reality is that many resented their situation and sought ways to to resist. Throughout history, numerous revolts have been documented, each fueled by a longing for freedom. These uprisings challenged the conventional narrative that portrays all slaves as submissive. In fact, it was the brutal conditions and dehumanizing treatment that often incited them to fight back. The cyclical nature of violence and oppression created an environment where rebellion was almost a natural response to injustice. Consider the impact of such revolts. In ancient Greece, even a small rebellion could send shockwaves through the community, prompting both fear and a re-evaluation of the societal norms surrounding slavery. You might think that these uprisings were isolated incidents, but in reality, they served as significant reminders of the humanity of those enslaved. Each act of resistance was not just a fight for personal freedom, it was a challenge to the entire system that supported slavery. Another layer to this discussion is the economic benefits of war-related slavery. The acquisition of slaves through warfare was not merely a byproduct of conflict, it was a strategic maneuver to enhance a city-state's wealth and power. Most people might think that the spoils of war consisted solely of gold and land, but the human capital gained was equally vital. Slaves contributed to the economy by producing goods, farming land, and performing skilled labor, thus reinforcing the societal hierarchy. Yet, this dependence on slave labor raises uncomfortable ethical questions. While the economy flourished, the moral implications of using humans as property lingered in the background. Many Greek citizens grappled with the idea that their prosperity was built on the suffering of others. How could they enjoy the benefits of a robust economy while simultaneously ignoring the plight of those who worked tirelessly in bondage? This contradiction highlights the ethical dilemmas that continue to resonate in modern discussions about labor practices and human rights. As we explore the relationship between slavery and warfare in ancient Greece, it becomes clear that these elements are deeply interconnected. The patterns established by ancient practices inform our understanding of current societal issues, including the ongoing struggle against modern slavery and human trafficking. Recognizing the historical context allows us to draw parallels between the past and present, illuminating how the legacy of slavery continues to influence contemporary society. In our next section, we will delve into the philosophical perspectives on slavery held by prominent thinkers like Aristotle. Prepare to uncover the complexities of their views and how these beliefs shaped societal norms, justifying the existence of slavery. You might be surprised at how these ancient philosophies echo in today's debates about freedom, ethics, and human rights. Did you know that many of the greatest minds of ancient Greece, including philosophers like Aristotle, held complex views on slavery? Most people think that philosophers would have denounced such an institution outright, yet many accepted it as a natural part of society. This shocking reality reveals how deeply entrenched slavery was in the fabric of Greek culture. Greek philosophers grappled with the concept of slavery, often justifying it as a necessary aspect of civilization. For instance, Aristotle famously argued that some people were natural slaves, suggesting that they were suited to servitude due to their inherent qualities. You might find this idea troubling, yet it influenced societal norms and perceptions around human value and rights. Philosophers' acceptance of slavery was not merely a reflection of their personal beliefs. It shaped how society functioned and interacted with the institution itself. However, it's crucial to understand that not all philosophers shared this view. There were thinkers who questioned the ethics of slavery, recognizing the moral dilemmas it posed. The tension between these conflicting philosophies created an environment ripe for debate, challenging individuals to confront the realities of their world. You may think these discussions were purely academic, but they had tangible consequences on how people viewed and treated slaves in everyday life. Consider the paradoxical nature of these philosophical discussions. On one hand, philosophers like Plato believed in the ideals of justice and virtue, yet on the other, they lived in a society that thrived on slavery. This contradiction raises essential questions about the ethical implications of benefiting from a system built on oppression. How could one advocate for justice while simultaneously participating in or condoning an unjust system? This moral conflict remains relevant today as we examine modern labor practices and human rights issues. Many people are surprised to learn that the philosophical discourse surrounding slavery extended beyond mere acceptance or rejection. Philosophers discussed the role slaves played in society, pondering their contributions and the dynamics of power at play. For instance, they debated whether a skilled slave, such as a teacher or a craftsman, should be treated differently from unskilled laborers. This differentiation hints at a complex understanding of social hierarchy, where value was assigned based on skills rather than just status as a slave. The existence of these discussions did not change the fact that most slaves were subjected to harsh realities. Many slaves were forced into labor against their will, often with little hope for freedom. This stark contrast between philosophical ideals and the lived experiences of slaves highlights the duality of Greek societies. It's essential to recognize this disparity as we explore how philosophical thought coexisted with the brutal practice of slavery. As we dive deeper, you'll see how these philosophical beliefs impacted not just the treatment of slaves, but also the broader social structure of ancient Greece. The acceptance of slavery as a natural institution reinforced social hierarchies, shaping relationships between free citizens and those in bondage. Most people don't realize realize that the very foundation of Athenian democracy relied on the labor of enslaved individuals, allowing free citizens to pursue intellectual and civic endeavors. This leads us to consider the implications of such a reliance on slavery. While some philosophers attempted to justify the institution, others were concerned about the potential for moral decay within society. They warned that a culture that normalized oppression could ultimately undermine its own values and ethics. This notion prompts us to reflect on the importance of critically examining the systems we participate in and their ethical implications. As we explore the philosophical perspectives on slavery, it becomes evident that the legacy of these discussions still resonates today. Many of the arguments presented by Greek philosophers continue to shape contemporary debates about human rights, labor practices, and ethical governance. This connection to modernity reinforces the significance of understanding historical philosophies, as they provide valuable insights into the complexities of justice and morality. In the next section, we will investigate the notable slave revolts and acts of resistance in ancient Greece. Prepare to discover how enslaved individuals fought against their oppressors and challenged the status quo, defying the expectation that they would remain passive victims. You might be shocked to learn just how significant these uprisings were and the impact they had on the perception of slavery in Greek society. Were there significant revolts against slavery in ancient Greece? This is a question that challenges the common perception of slaves as mere passive victims of a harsh system. While many may think that slavery was unchallenged, the truth reveals a complex narrative of resistance and resilience. In ancient Greece, slave revolts, though less common than in other cultures, did occur, with notable instances challenging the status quo. The most famous revolt was the one led by Spartacus, although this was primarily associated with the Roman Empire. However, we cannot overlook smaller uprisings that occurred in various city-states, fueled by discontent and a desire for freedom. This opens a dialogue about the nature of resistance and how it manifested in different forms throughout history. Strangely enough, many people believe that slaves were content with their lot, but the reality is quite different. The harsh treatment, lack of rights, and constant threat of punishment created an environment ripe for rebellion. Yet the methods of resistance were not always overt. Many slaves practiced subtle forms of sabotage, breaking tools, slowing work, or feigning illness to assert some control over their lives. This highlights a complex relationship between oppressors and the oppressed, where resistance was not always a loud declaration, but rather a quiet, strategic assertion of agency. Understanding the nature of slave revolts in ancient Greece requires us to recognize the cultural and social dynamics at play. Most people don't realize that the experience of being a slave was not uniform. There were variations in treatment based on the region, the owner, and the skills of the slaves themselves. Skilled slaves often had more opportunities and could negotiate better terms, whereas those in agricultural or domestic roles faced harsher realities. This disparity added layers to the motivations behind revolts. Some slaves fought for freedom, while others sought better treatment. Furthermore, it's important to note that revolts were not only reactions to oppression, they were also shaped by the broader context of warfare and politics. Constant state of conflict in the ancient world meant that slaves could often be caught up in larger battles. For example, during the Peloponnesian War, many enslaved individuals saw opportunities to escape amidst the chaos. The interplay between war and slavery complicates the narrative, illustrating that these revolts were often influenced by external factors beyond mere dissatisfaction with their conditions. As we delve deeper into the stories of resistance, you'll see that many slaves found inspiration in their cultural backgrounds, drawing on communal ties and shared histories. This connection fostered a sense of solidarity, which was crucial for organizing revolts and fostering a spirit of defiance. You might find it surprising that cultural identity played such a pivotal role in resistance efforts, as it provided not just a motivation but also a framework for collective action. Recognizing these acts of resistance challenges the stereotype of all slaves being passive participants in their fate. Many were strategic thinkers, considering not only the immediate risks but also the potential for future freedom or improved conditions. This notion that slaves could be agents of change is a powerful reminder that history is often more nuanced than it appears at first glance. Moreover, these revolts, both large and small, had lasting impacts on society and influenced how future generations viewed the institution of slavery. The fear of rebellion often prompted owners to implement stricter controls and harsher punishments, creating a cycle of oppression that made life increasingly difficult for slaves. These very actions also sparked debates about morality and justice that resonated through time, influencing philosophical discussions and shaping societal norms. As we transition into the next section, we will explore how philosophical perspectives on slavery were intertwined with these acts of resistance. It will be fascinating to see how thinkers like Aristotle, who justified slavery as a natural institution, reacted to the reality of revolt. You'll discover that the philosophical discourse on slavery wasn't just theoretical. It was deeply connected to the lived experiences of those who fought against it, creating a rich tapestry of thought and action that still informs our discussions on human rights today. What impact did ancient Greek slavery have on future societies? This question delves into the profound legacy left by a system that many may perceive solely through the lens systems of cruelty and oppression. Yet the influence of Greek slavery extends far beyond its immediate context, shaping the very foundations of labor, citizenship, and human rights as we understand them today. To begin, consider this surprising fact. Many principles we associate with democracy and individual rights can trace their roots back to the societal structures established in ancient Greece. This civilization did not merely function on the backs of enslaved individuals. It thrived and evolved through complex interactions that defined social hierarchies and relationships. Slavery was woven into the fabric of Greek life, influencing economic, cultural, and political realms in ways that would resonate for centuries. Slavery in ancient Greece set a precedent for the Roman Empire, which adopted and expanded upon these practices. Roman slavery was influenced significantly by Greek ideas, creating a model of labor that emphasized exploitation and dependency. This legacy of slavery directly shaped Roman laws and governance, embedding the institution within the societal structure of the empire. Many people might not realize that the way labor was perceived and organized during these times laid the groundwork for modern concepts of employment and class distinctions. As we unpack this legacy further, we must recognize that the discussions surrounding citizenship also stemmed from the Greek experience with slavery. In Athens, for instance, free citizens could enjoy rights and privileges that were starkly denied to slaves. This dichotomy fostered an understanding of citizenship that included a clear demarcation of rights based on social status, which was often linked to one's relationship with slavery. As Greece transitioned into the Roman era, these ideas became codified, influencing how subsequent civilizations defined the roles and rights of individuals within society. Moreover, many of the human rights ideas that we cherish today were seated in discussions among Greek philosophers. Though many of them justified slavery, their inquiries into the nature of justice and the human condition prompted later thinkers to reconsider the ethical implications of human subjugation. For instance, the Stoics advocated for a universal brotherhood among humans, challenging the very foundations of slavery by asserting that all individuals possessed inherent dignity. This philosophical evolution paved the way for later movements that fought against slavery and for civil rights, demonstrating the enduring power of Greek thought. It's essential to highlight the historical role of slave labor in shaping economic systems. In Greece, enslaved people worked in agriculture, domestic settings, and skilled trades, contributing to the economy's robustness. This reliance on slavery for economic growth posed ethical questions that echoed through time, challenging future societies to grapple with the morality of labor and exploitation. As modern economies evolved, the question of how labor is sourced and valued remained pertinent. Stemming from these ancient practices, many people might find it hard to believe that the reverberations of Greek slavery are still felt today, particularly in the realms of economics and labor rights. As societies began to address the injustices of slavery, many of the frameworks put in place aimed to prevent exploitation, protect workers' rights, and ensure equitable treatment in the workforce. The historical context of slavery has fueled ongoing dialogues about economic disparity and the rights of laborers, illustrating the importance of acknowledging this legacy in contemporary discussions. Furthermore, understanding the legacy of ancient Greek slavery sheds light on modern-day human trafficking and modern slavery issues. The historical practice of enslavement and the subsequent philosophical and ethical debates surrounding it serve as a critical foundation for understanding contemporary human rights violations. By examining the past, we can gain insights into current struggles for freedom and equality, prompting us to ask hard questions about our societal structures and the inherent value we place on human life. As we reflect on the lasting impact of ancient Greek slavery, it's crucial to recognize that this legacy is not solely one of oppression, but also of evolution and change. The discussions and ideas generated during this time continue to influence how we perceive labor, citizenship, and human rights today. In summary, the legacy of ancient Greek slavery is a complex tapestry interwoven with threads of economic practice, philosophical inquiry, and social structure. It challenges us to understand the past's influence on present realities, pushing us to advocate for justice and equality in our societies. As we move forward, let us carry these lessons with us, ensuring that the stories of those who suffered are never forgotten and that their struggles inform our pursuit of a more equitable world. Next, we will explore common myths about Greek slavery that have persisted through time. You might think you know the full story, but some of the widely held beliefs might surprise you. So stay tuned as we dive into the misconceptions surrounding this multifaceted topic. What common myths about ancient Greek slavery should be debunked? This question is crucial as we unravel the layers of misunderstanding surrounding this complex institution. Most people think that all slaves in ancient Greece endured the same miserable fate, but the reality is much more nuanced and varied. Let's start with a surprising fact. Not all slaves were treated equally poorly. Many individuals may imagine a single bleak existence for all enslaved people, but in truth, their experiences varied significantly depending on several factors, such as their roles, skills, and the whims of their owners. For instance, domestic slaves often enjoyed a different lifestyle compared to agricultural workers or those forced into mines, while some domestic slaves had relatively stable living conditions and even participated in family life. Agriculture agricultural slaves faced harsh realities in the fields. This distinction reveals how slavery was not a monolithic experience, but rather a spectrum of conditions. Furthermore, some slaves were highly skilled individuals who played crucial roles in their societies. For example, skilled craftsmen, teachers, and even physicians could find themselves in a position of relative comfort. They often had more rights and could earn money or goods, sometimes even leading to opportunities for freedom. This aspect challenges the stereotype of slaves as mere victims, illustrating how some navigated their circumstances to improve their situations, albeit within a constrained system. It's a little-known fact that these skilled slaves could sometimes own property, albeit under strict conditions, and this agency complicates the narrative of unrelenting oppression. Another myth is the idea that all slaves were desperate to escape. While it's true that many enslaved people sought freedom, the reality was more complex. Some were integrated into their households and communities to the point where they developed bonds with their owners. This led to varying motivations regarding escape. Some chose to stay for the stability and security their roles provided, despite the overall system being unjust. This complexity challenges the black and white narrative of slavery, showing that individual choices were often influenced by a variety of personal and situational factors. Now, let's address the controversial notion that Greek slavery was an entirely negative institution. While it is undeniable that the system was fundamentally exploitative, it also contributed to the cultural and economic fabric of Greek society. The labor provided by slaves allowed many free citizens to engage in philosophical pursuits and political life. This contradiction invites a critical examination of how societies can evolve and prosper, even when built on exploitative foundations. Many may resist this idea, arguing that no progress can justify such suffering, but it's essential to recognize the complexity of these historical realities. The narrative surrounding ancient Greek slavery is further complicated by the fact that many people view this institution through a contemporary lens. It's important to understand that the concepts of freedom and human rights were not as developed in ancient times as they are today. The existence of slavery did not negate the advancements in art, philosophy, and governance that emerged from this period. Understanding these contexts helps us appreciate the full scope of ancient Greek society, rather than reducing it to a single narrative of suffering. Moreover, when we dissect the myths surrounding Greek slavery, we also uncover the lasting effects these misconceptions have on our understanding of historical practices. Modern discussions about labor rights, human trafficking, and exploitation can benefit from a nuanced understanding of the past. The myths we believe can shape the policies and attitudes we hold today, influencing how we approach contemporary issues of justice and equality. To wrap up this section, we must recognize that while slavery was an integral part of ancient Greek society, the narratives we construct around it often lack the depth necessary for understanding its complexities. Debunking these myths allows for a richer exploration of the social dynamics at play during this time. It invites us to reconsider how we view historical injustices and their lasting impacts on our modern world. As we move on to the next segment, we will dive into the specific roles of women in slavery, exploring how their experiences differed from those of men. This exploration will shed light on the unique challenges and opportunities faced by female slaves in ancient Greek society, highlighting the importance of gender dynamics in understanding the institution of slavery as a whole. How did women experience slavery differently than men in ancient Greece? This question uncovers a complex and often overlooked aspect of the institution of slavery in the ancient world. Many people may think that all slaves endured the same harsh conditions, but the reality is that gender played a significant role in shaping their experiences. To begin, let's consider a surprising fact. Female slaves often faced unique challenges that male slaves did not. While both genders were subjected to the overarching cruelty of slavery, the types of work and the expectations placed upon them vary greatly. Many female slaves worked in domestic settings, fulfilling roles such as cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing. This domestic work often placed them in intimate proximity to their owners, leading to different dynamics than those experienced by male agricultural or manual laborers. The line between servitude and domesticity was blurred, and many female slaves became caretakers within the family structure they served. However, being in a domestic role didn't necessarily equate to better treatment. In fact, these women were often vulnerable to exploitation in ways that male slaves were not. A strange fact that may surprise viewers is that female slaves could be subjected to sexual exploitation by their masters. The threat of sexual abuse was a constant reality for many, and some women found themselves forced into concubinage or other forms of sexual servitude. This exploitation raises complex questions about agency and consent, challenging our modern understanding of these concepts. It's a stark reminder of how the vulnerability of women in slavery was compounded by their gender. Interestingly, some women did find opportunities to gain status through their relationships with their owners. While it was not common, a few female slaves could rise in status by becoming favored concubines, or even by marrying their masters. These relationships, while rooted in a power imbalance, sometimes allowed women to navigate their circumstances in ways that were unavailable to their male counterparts. This complexity adds a layer of nuance to our understanding of their lives, as some women managed to create a semblance of stability and security in a fundamentally oppressive system. However, this arrangement acknowledgement often came at a significant personal cost and cannot be viewed as a blanket improvement over the lives of male slaves. Moreover, understanding the gender dynamics within slavery also sheds light on the broader societal views of women in ancient Greece. Greek culture generally viewed women as inferior and confined to domestic spheres, and this mindset permeated the institution of slavery. Female slaves were often seen not just as property but as extensions of their masters' households. This perspective shaped how they were treated, highlighting the intertwining of gender, class, and slavery in ancient societies. It is also worth noting that women played crucial roles in maintaining the social fabric of the households they served. Their labor ensured the functioning of daily life, often making them indispensable despite their low status. This essential nature of their work, however, was rarely recognized or rewarded, further complicating their place within the social hierarchy. It might surprise you to learn that some slave women, particularly those in skilled positions, could even wield considerable influence within the households they served, though this power was limited and always conditional upon their status as slaves. As we delve deeper into the lives of these women, it becomes clear that their stories are filled with resilience, defiance, and an ongoing struggle for autonomy within a system designed to strip them of it. Many female slaves resisted their oppression in subtle yet impactful ways, from forming bonds with other slaves to engaging in acts of sabotage against their masters. These women found ways to assert their identities and agency, even in dire circumstances. Such acts challenge the stereotype of the passive slave, showing us that resistance took many forms, often shaped by the unique experiences of women. In conclusion, the experiences of women in slavery during ancient Greece were multifaceted and often deeply troubling. They navigated a landscape filled with exploitation, vulnerability, and a constant struggle for dignity. By understanding these complexities, we gain a more profound appreciation of the historical narratives that shape our current discussions about gender and power. As we move forward, we'll continue to explore how these dynamics played out in other areas of ancient life, including cultural representations and education, highlighting the diverse experiences within the institution of slavery. This exploration will further illuminate the complexities of ancient societies and their legacies. How is slavery portrayed in ancient Greek art and literature? This question invites us to delve into the cultural representations that shaped and reflected societal attitudes towards slavery. Most people think of ancient art as mere decoration, but in reality, it served as a profound commentary on the values and struggles of the time. One fascinating aspect to consider is that many artworks from this period depict not just the lives of the elite, but also the daily experiences of slaves. Imagine walking through an ancient marketplace, surrounded by vibrant pottery adorned with scenes of domestic life. You might notice that these pieces often showcase slaves in various roles, cooking, serving, or performing manual labor. This visibility challenges the notion that slaves were entirely erased from the cultural narrative of ancient Greece. Rather than being mere background figures, they are depicted as integral to the functioning of society. However, the representation of slaves in art also raises complex questions about their roles. For instance, many might assume that all slave representations were inherently negative or dehumanizing, but in fact, some artworks highlight the skills and contributions of slaves, particularly those in specialized roles such as artisans or educators. This nuanced portrayal complicates our understanding of slavery, suggesting that while slaves were certainly not free, they could also possess unique talents and earn a measure of respect within their limited circumstances. Another intriguing aspect is the way literature reflects societal views on slavery. In plays by playwrights like Aristophanes, slaves often appear as witty and clever characters, capable of outsmarting their masters. These portrayals serve as both entertainment and subtle critique, providing audiences with moments of levity while also challenging the authority of slave owners. One might find it surprising that such humor could exist alongside an institution as brutal as slavery, but this juxtaposition reveals the complexities of human relationships, even within oppressive systems. Moreover, these literary depictions often offer insights into the emotional and psychological impacts of slavery. In texts where slaves are given a voice, we can glimpse their inner lives, dreams, fears, and desires that resonate with our own. This humanization is crucial for understanding the lived experiences of slaves beyond their roles as mere property. A thought-provoking fact here is that some ancient playwrights, aware of the public's fascination with slaves, cleverly used their characters to explore themes of freedom and oppression, making the audience reflect on their own values. Yet it's essential to acknowledge that not all representations were positive. Many artworks and literary works perpetuated stereotypes that reinforced the power dynamics of the time. Slaves were often depicted as inferior, reinforcing the belief that their subjugation was justified. This controversial aspect challenges viewers to confront the uncomfortable reality of how art can be used to normalize societal inequalities. It also raises questions about the ethics of representation and the responsibilities of artists in shaping public perceptions. As we dig deeper into these cultural representations, we find that they not only reflect attitudes of the time, but also contribute to the ongoing dialogue about freedom and justice. By analyzing the art and literature of ancient Greece, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of how slavery influenced the social fabric fabric of the period. Recognizing these artistic and literary portrayals allows us to see the complexities of human experience within the context of slavery. It's a reminder that even in the darkest corners of history, there were voices, stories, and representations that pushed against the status quo. This exploration into the cultural representation of slavery in ancient Greece provides us with a rich tapestry of perspectives that informs our modern discussions about freedom, rights, and justice. In conclusion, the portrayal of slavery in ancient Greek art and literature reveals the intricate dynamics of power, identity, and resistance. These cultural artifacts offer us valuable insights into the lives of slaves and the attitudes of their society, emphasizing the importance of examining history from multiple angles. As we continue our journey, we'll explore how these dynamics played out in the education of slaves, shedding light on their access to knowledge and its impact on their status. This next section will further enrich our understanding of the complexities of slavery in the ancient world. Did slaves in ancient Greece have access to education? This question opens a fascinating window into a world that many might assume was closed off to the enslaved population. Most people think that education was a privilege reserved only for the wealthy and free citizens, but the reality is that some slaves did receive education, offering them unique opportunities and insights into their potential. In ancient Greece, the education of slaves varied significantly based on their roles and the families they served. For instance, those who worked in wealthy households often had access to education. This included not just basic literacy and numeracy, but also training in various skilled professions. Imagine a slave in a prosperous Athenian home, learning philosophy or literature from his master while also fulfilling his duties. This is not merely a tale of oppression. It's a glimpse into a more complex societal structure where education could lead to opportunities for mobility. Strikingly, some educated slaves became teachers or scribes themselves. This illustrates a fascinating dynamic. While they were enslaved, they possessed knowledge that could elevate their status, albeit within the confines of servitude. It's a strange fact that despite being property, some slaves wielded a form of power through their education. They could navigate social situations and influence their immediate environment in ways that were often overlooked. However, this educational access also raised questions about the nature of slavery itself. For instance, many might argue that if some slaves could attain education, it somehow justified the institution of slavery. This controversial perspective invites us to wrestle with uncomfortable truths about freedom and autonomy. How can we reconcile the notion of a gifted slave with the harsh reality of their bondage? This tension between opportunity and oppression underlines the moral complexities inherent in ancient societies. Yet not all slaves had equal access to education. Those who worked in mines or on farms typically received no education at all. Their lives were characterized by backbreaking labor and little hope for advancement. This stark contrast illustrates the class divisions within slavery itself. It's worth noting that the life expectancy of these laborers was significantly shorter due to the harsh conditions, leading to a life filled with struggle and few chances for change. As we explore the nuances of education within slavery, we must also consider the broader implications. Education provided a pathway not just for individual advancement, but also for the transmission of ideas. Some slaves, educated in literature or philosophy, would have the potential to influence thought and culture, albeit from a marginalized position. For instance, educated slaves could engage in conversations about freedom and morality, even while their own circumstances remained unchanged. Moreover, the existence of educated slaves complicates the narrative surrounding resistance and rebellion. Many educated individuals were aware of the injustices surrounding them and might have been more inclined to seek freedom or advocate for change. This idea leads us to the crucial insight that education can empower individuals, even in the most oppressive situations. It equips them with the tools to challenge their circumstances, fostering a sense of agency that transcends their immediate plight. It's also essential to recognize how the education of slaves in ancient Greece informed the broader society. The philosophical discussions and debates that took place within these households would have far-reaching effects on the ideas of citizenship, rights, and humanity. As educated slaves engaged with their masters, they would contribute to a dialogue that questioned the very foundations of social hierarchies. In sum, the educational experiences of slaves in ancient Greece reveal a complex interplay of opportunity and oppression. While some were afforded the chance to learn and grow, many others remained trapped in a cycle of labor with little hope for advancement. This disparity underscores the multifaceted nature of slavery, challenging us to reconsider our assumptions about power, knowledge, and human dignity. Understanding the educational landscape of slaves in ancient Greece provides us with valuable lessons for today. It reminds us that education is a powerful tool for liberation and empowerment, regardless of one's social status. As we move forward in our exploration, we'll uncover more about the modern connections to ancient practices, particularly how the lessons learned from history can inform our current discussions on human rights and equality. This next section will help bridge the gap between the past and present, emphasizing the relevance of these ancient experiences in our ongoing fight for justice and freedom. What lessons can we learn from ancient Greek slavery today? This question resonates deeply as we explore the historical practices of one of the world's world's most influential civilizations. Most people think of slavery as a relic of the past, something that has little to do with modern society. However, the realities of ancient Greek slavery hold important lessons about human rights and the struggles for equality that persist today. To begin, it's crucial to recognize that ancient Greek slavery was not merely a system of oppression. It was an institution that shaped the very foundations of Greek society. The complexities of this system reflect how power dynamics operate in various forms, even in contemporary society. By examining these historical contexts, we can better understand the roots of social injustices that still exist. A fascinating fact is that the economy of ancient Greece heavily relied on slavery, much like certain industries today that exploit labor. Slaves were integral to agriculture, craftsmanship, and trade, producing goods that enriched their owners while perpetuating cycles of inequality. This reliance on an oppressed class raises an important question for us: what modern industries might be benefiting from similar exploitative practices? Recognizing these parallels urges us to scrutinize our own consumption habits and the ethical implications behind them. In addition, the notion of citizenship that emerged in ancient Greece was built upon exclusion. Only free men could claim citizenship, while women and slaves were left out of this social contract. This exclusionary practice serves as a reminder that the rights we often take for granted were historically denied to many. Today, as we advocate for inclusive policies that promote equality, it's vital to reflect on who gets included and who continues to be marginalized. The struggle for civil rights and social justice today echoes the very conversations that took place in the halls of Athenian democracy, albeit without the voices of those who were silenced. An interesting, albeit controversial point is that some slaves in ancient Greece managed to negotiate their own status and even buy their freedom. This rare opportunity reflects a complex layer of agency within a system designed to strip individuals of their autonomy. It challenges us to consider the resilience of those oppressed and the different ways in which people navigate power structures. What can modern movements for justice learn from these historical acts of agency? Understanding the multifaceted responses to oppression helps us appreciate the power of resilience in the face of systemic injustice. Moreover, the resistance of slaves against their conditions serves as a profound lesson. While ancient Greece may not have witnessed revolts on the scale seen in other societies, acts of subtle resistance, from sabotaging work to forming secret networks, were commonplace. Recognizing these acts as forms of defiance reminds us that resistance can take many shapes. This is especially relevant today, where many grassroots movements focus on reforming systemic inequities through peaceful protest and civil disobedience. As we delve deeper into the lessons from ancient Greek slavery, we must also confront the uncomfortable truths about how these practices shaped philosophical and ethical discussions. Thinkers like Aristotle justified slavery based on a belief in natural hierarchies, raising troubling questions about moral philosophies that persist in various forms today. Many contemporary ideologies still reflect the echoes of these ancient rationalizations. Engaging with this philosophical lineage forces us to evaluate how we justify social inequalities in our own time. Recognizing the impact of ancient Greek slavery on modern society ultimately leads us to the importance of historical awareness. By understanding how the past informs the present, we can work towards a future that acknowledges the lessons learned and strives for justice and equality. Each step toward a more equitable society is rooted in recognizing the struggles of those who came before us. Their experiences are not just historical footnotes, but are critical to understanding our ongoing journey toward human rights. In conclusion, the legacy of ancient Greek slavery provides us with powerful lessons that resonate through the ages. By reflecting on these lessons, we are not only honoring those who endured, but also equipping ourselves with the knowledge needed to combat injustice in its many forms today. This exploration reveals the necessity of recognizing historical practices in informing our modern views on freedom, equality, and the human experience. As we move forward, let's commit to learning from the past, ensuring that we build a society that values and uplifts all individuals. This is the essence of understanding our shared humanity and the pursuit of justice that transcends time. How does ancient Greek slavery compare to other cultures? This question opens a fascinating window into the complexities of human societies. Most people think of slavery as a monolithic institution with similar practices across different cultures. However, the reality is far more intricate, revealing a tapestry of human experience that is both diverse and illuminating. In ancient Greece, slavery was deeply embedded in society, shaping its economy, culture, and social structure. But as we look across the globe and throughout history, we discover that the practice of slavery varied significantly in different civilizations. For example, while Greek slaves primarily performed domestic and agricultural labor, in other cultures, slaves were often utilized for military service or skilled labor. This highlights the adaptability of the institution, revealing how it was molded by the needs and values of each society. Consider the Roman Empire, which drew heavily from the Greek model of slavery but expanded upon it dramatically. Roman slavery was more institutionalized and complex, with slaves being a significant part of the military apparatus. Unlike Greek slaves, who could sometimes earn their freedom through various means, Roman slaves often had less opportunity for upward mobility. This contrast contrast raises intriguing questions about how social structures can influence the treatment and roles of enslaved individuals. A curious fact about slavery in the Americas, particularly during the transatlantic slave trade, is that slaves were often treated as. In contrast, ancient Greek society at least acknowledged the existence of personal relationships among slaves. Some Greek slaves had the opportunity to own property, buy their freedom, or even manage their own businesses. This distinction emphasizes a critical point. While all forms of slavery are oppressive, the cultural context can significantly affect the lived experiences of those enslaved. However, one controversial perspective is that some cultures viewed slavery as a necessary institution for economic and social development. In ancient Greece, for instance, philosophers like Aristotle rationalized slavery as a natural state of being for certain individuals. This justification raises ethical questions that resonate through time and into contemporary discussions about labor and human rights. Are there modern justifications for exploitative labor practices that echo this ancient reasoning? Exploring these comparisons encourages us to critically examine our current societal norms. In examining slavery across different cultures, we also encounter unique forms of resistance and rebellion. While ancient Greece saw relatively few large-scale revolts, like the one led by Spartacus, other societies experienced significant uprisings, such as those in the Americas and the Caribbean. The stories of resistance, whether through rebellion or subtle acts of defiance, reveal a common thread of human resilience. This acknowledgement of resistance challenges the stereotype that enslaved individuals were merely passive victims. Another intriguing aspect to consider is the role of gender within slavery across various cultures. In ancient Greece, female slaves often faced different challenges compared to their male counterparts, typically performing domestic tasks and facing sexual exploitation. However, this gendered perspective of slavery was not unique to Greece. In many societies, women were disproportionately affected by the institution of slavery, often bearing the brunt of its abuses. This commonality provides a critical lens through which we can explore the intersection of gender and slavery throughout history. The concept of race also significantly influenced the practice of slavery in various cultures. In ancient Greece, while slavery was not based on race as it became in the Americas, the treatment of slaves often depended on their ethnic backgrounds. This raises a thought-provoking question. How do perceptions of race shape the institution of slavery across different cultures? By examining the racial dynamics of slavery in various contexts, we can gain a deeper understanding of how these constructs have evolved over time. As we navigate the complexities of slavery across cultures, it's essential to reflect on the legacies that these practices have left behind. The lasting impacts of slavery extend into modern discussions about systemic inequality and human rights. By understanding how different societies have dealt with slavery, we can better comprehend the roots of contemporary injustices and work towards meaningful change. In conclusion, comparing ancient Greek slavery to other cultures reveals a rich tapestry of human experience characterized by both suffering and resilience. It challenges us to recognize that while slavery may manifest differently across societies, the underlying themes of power, control, and resistance remain relevant today. This exploration not only enriches our understanding of history, but also informs our ongoing fight for justice and equality in the modern world. By learning from the past, we can better navigate the challenges of the present and strive for a more equitable future for all. What ethical questions arise from studying ancient Greek slavery? This intriguing question prompts us to examine not only the practices of the past, but also their implications for our present and future. Most people think of ethics in terms of right and wrong, but the reality of slavery complicates this simplistic view. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior and societal structures. Engaging with the morality of slavery challenges our understanding of justice in profound ways. While many societies have acknowledged slavery as an abhorrent practice, the justifications for it historically reveal a darker side of human rationalization. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Aristotle argued that slavery was a natural order of society, a viewpoint that many accepted and that influenced social norms for centuries. This raises ethical dilemmas that are still relevant today. How can society justify the subjugation of one group by another? The implications of benefiting from a system built on oppression cannot be ignored. Consider how many modern economies, including those in the West, were built on the backs of enslaved individuals. The wealth generated from these systems often continues to affect social hierarchies today, creating a cycle of privilege and disadvantage. Reflecting on these ethical dilemmas is crucial for developing a nuanced view of history and understanding the roots of contemporary social issues. One rarely discussed aspect is how these historical practices inform current conversations about human rights. For instance, the debates surrounding labor rights in today's global economy often mirror past discussions about slavery. Modern labor practices in some countries echo the exploitative systems of the past, where workers, often women and children, face dire conditions for minimal compensation. Recognizing these connections between ancient and modern forms of exploitation can lead to a deeper understanding of justice and equality. Ethical questions about slavery also lead us to consider the narratives we create about history. How do we frame the stories of those who lived through these experiences? Are we perpetuating a victim narrative that undermines the agency of those who resisted and fought for their freedom? By examining individual narratives and personal stories, we humanize historical figures often viewed only as statistics. This shift in perspective encourages empathy and connection to the past, revealing that even within oppressive systems, individuals sought dignity and autonomy. Moreover, the legacy of philosophical justifications for slavery can still be seen in contemporary debates about meritocracy and social mobility. Many people believe that success is solely a product of individual effort, ignoring the systemic barriers that continue to affect marginalized communities. This belief perpetuates an ethical dilemma. Should society acknowledge and address these inequalities, or do we accept them as the natural order of things? As we delve deeper into the ethical considerations of slavery, we also confront the role of education and awareness in shaping our understanding of history. The way we teach and discuss slavery can either perpetuate ignorance or foster critical thinking. By integrating discussions about the ethical implications of slavery into educational curriculums, we can cultivate a society that values human rights and strives for justice. Ultimately, engaging with the ethical dilemmas surrounding ancient Greek slavery compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own society. It challenges us to reflect on our values and the legacies of our past. Understanding these complexities is essential for developing a more equitable future, one where the lessons of history guide our actions toward justice and compassion. By examining the ethical questions that arise from studying ancient Greek slavery, we gain invaluable insights into the nature of humanity and the structures that govern our lives. This exploration not only enriches our understanding of history, but also informs our efforts to create a more just and equitable society today. As we reflect on these past injustices, we must ask ourselves, what can we do to ensure that history does not repeat itself? And how can we honor the struggles of those who came before us in our quest for equality and justice? What can we learn from individual slave narratives? This question invites us to delve deep into the human experiences of those who lived under the oppressive system of slavery in ancient Greece. While many people may think of slaves as mere victims of their circumstances, the reality is that their stories are rich, complex, and full of resilience and agency. Today, we'll explore how these narratives provide invaluable insights into the emotional and psychological impacts of slavery, challenging our preconceptions about what it means to be enslaved. Personal stories from history are often the most powerful tools for understanding the human conditions. They offer us a window into the lives of individuals who faced unimaginable challenges, allowing us to empathize with their struggles and triumphs. In Greece, slaves often had to navigate a precarious existence, defined not just by their status but by their relationships, aspirations, and the harsh realities of their everyday lives. One striking fact is that some slaves, particularly those in wealthy households, were given opportunities to be educated. Imagine a young boy born into slavery with little hope of freedom, who was nonetheless taught to read and write. This scenario challenges the notion that education was strictly reserved for the freeborn. It raises an intriguing question. How did these educated slaves view their status, and did knowledge empower them in ways that subverted their oppression? These narratives often reveal a range of emotions, from despair and hopelessness to resilience and defiance. For example, consider the story of a slave who may have worked tirelessly for their master, but also nurtured dreams of freedom and autonomy. Such personal stories often include acts of quiet rebellion, small gestures of resistance that, while not overtly confrontational, reflect a deep-seated desire for dignity and self-determination. These acts challenge the stereotype that all slaves were passive, merely accepting their fate. Understanding these individual experiences creates empathy and connection to the past. When we read about the aspirations, fears, and desires of slaves, we begin to see them as fully realized human beings rather than mere victims of a cruel system. For instance, some narratives describe how slaves formed close-knit communities, sharing stories, traditions, and even strategies for coping with their circumstances. These relationships provided emotional support and fostered a sense of belonging, highlighting the resilience of the human spirit even in the darkest of times. There's also the aspect of identity. Many slaves in ancient Greece, despite their status, crafted identities that intertwined elements of their cultural backgrounds with the realities of their lives. For example, some would have identified strongly with their home cities or ethnic groups, even while living under the heavy yoke of slavery. This identity could serve as a source of strength and motivation, encouraging them to seek out ways to express their culture and humanity despite their circumstances. Additionally, the stories of resistance are critical in understanding how slaves fought against their oppression. Some slaves organized revolts, while others employed subtler forms of sabotage or deception. These narratives show that resistance took many forms, and that each individual's choice reflects a complex interplay of fear, hope, and the desire for freedom. This multifaceted nature of resistance complicates our understanding of the enslaved experience, pushing us to recognize the agency that many enslaved individuals exerted over their lives. In recognizing these stories, we are reminded of the importance of history in shaping contemporary discussions around race, identity, and justice. The echoes of the past are often felt in today's society, as issues of inequality and injustice injustice continue to persist. By studying individual narratives of slaves in ancient Greece, we not only honor their struggles but also gain perspective on the ongoing fight for human rights and dignity in our modern world. Moreover, these narratives often confront us with uncomfortable truths about our own societies. They challenge us to reflect on the legacies of oppression and how these histories inform current social dynamics. Are we perpetuating systems of inequality today? What can we learn from the resilience and resistance of those who came before us? As we delve into the stories of individual slaves, we are presented with the opportunity to reflect on our own values and the collective memory of humanity. It encourages us to ask difficult questions about justice, equity, and our responsibilities toward one another as we navigate the complexities of contemporary society. Ultimately, the personal stories of slaves in ancient Greece offer a profound understanding of the human spirit's resilience in the face of adversity. They teach us that even in the darkest times, individuals can find ways to assert their humanity, forge connections, and dream of a better future. By listening to these stories, we enrich our understanding of history and learn valuable lessons about empathy, resistance, and the enduring struggle for justice. How has ancient Greek slavery influenced modern society? This question is not just a historical inquiry. It challenges us to examine the roots of contemporary issues regarding labor, rights, and social structures. While many people might think of slavery as a relic of the past, its values and beliefs have insidiously woven themselves into the fabric of our modern lives. To truly understand this influence, we must look back at the economic, social, and political systems that were shaped by slavery in ancient Greece. Surprisingly, the practices of that era laid the groundwork for various forms of labor exploitation that persist today. For instance, the ancient Greeks relied heavily on slave labor for agriculture, craftsmanship, and even domestic work. This dependency on a class of non-free workers helped to build a prosperous economy, but also raised ethical questions about human rights that remain relevant. Interestingly, the concept of citizenship itself in ancient Greece was often built upon the backs of slaves. Only freeborn citizens could participate in the democratic processes of city-states like Athens, which raises a provocative point. Was the freedom enjoyed by some directly linked to the oppression of others? This reflects a troubling dichotomy that can still be observed today, where the privileges of one group may be rooted in the disenfranchisement of another. One controversial notion that emerges from this discussion is that the legacy of Greek slavery has not been entirely negative. In fact, it has contributed to various philosophical and political frameworks that advocate for human rights and social justice. For instance, thinkers from the ancient Greek era, despite endorsing slavery, also laid down the philosophical underpinnings for discussions around ethics, governance, and the very concept of equality. These ideas have evolved and been reinterpreted over time, influencing movements for abolition and civil rights throughout history. Moreover, the echoes of slavery can be seen in contemporary labor practices around the world. Conditions that mirror slavery, such as human trafficking and sweatshop labor, highlight the ongoing struggle against exploitation. By recognizing these connections, we can better understand the systemic nature of oppression and work towards creating more equitable systems. As we examine the lasting impact of ancient Greek slavery, we cannot overlook the importance of personal stories and narratives that have emerged from this dark chapter in history. These narratives not only offer insights into the emotional and psychological impacts of slavery, but also serve to humanize the individuals involved. For example, personal accounts from enslaved individuals reveal their struggles, dreams, and desires for freedom, which resonate powerfully with modern audiences. These stories challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about our history and reflect on how far we have come, or how far we still need to go. They encourage empathy, reminding us that behind the statistics and historical accounts are real people who endured suffering and fought for their dignity. The impact of ancient Greek slavery extends beyond its historical context. It compels us to examine our current societal norms and values. What can we learn from the past to create a more just and equitable future? Recognizing the connections between ancient practices and modern realities is crucial for understanding the ongoing fight for human rights. In conclusion, the legacy of ancient Greek slavery is complex and multifaceted. It serves as a reminder that the values and beliefs surrounding slavery continue to impact social structures today. By exploring this legacy, we not only gain insight into our history, but also empower ourselves to challenge modern injustices. This exploration reveals the importance of learning from the past, ensuring that we do not repeat the mistakes of history, and strive for a better, more equitable future for all. What can we learn from individual slave narratives? This question may seem straightforward, but the answers are profound, illuminating the often overlooked personal experiences of those who lived through the brutality of slavery. Our history tends to present a macro view of slavery, focusing on economic, political, or social aspects. The individual stories of slaves provide a nuanced understanding of their struggles, desires, and resilience. Many people might think that slaves were merely victims in a harsh system, but the reality is far more complex. Each narrative is unique, shaped by personal circumstances, cultural backgrounds, and even individual character traits. For instance, some slaves were born into captivity, while others were captured in wars or sold into slavery due to debt. This variation in circumstances circumstances challenges the notion that all slaves shared the same experiences. Consider the story of a young boy named Aesop, who is often remembered as the famed storyteller. Though he is now associated with fables, Aesop's life was marked by hardship as a slave in ancient Greece. His narratives not only entertained but also conveyed moral lessons, allowing him to wield a form of power through storytelling. His tale illustrates how slaves could find ways to express their individuality and influence their surroundings, despite the constraints of their situation. Strangely enough, many slave narratives include elements of humor and wit, even in the face of adversity. This duality of experience, suffering alongside moments of levity, demonstrates the resilience of the human spirit. Humor became a survival tool for some slaves, a way to cope with their harsh realities. These anecdotes not only provide insight into their day-to-day lives, but also humanize them, allowing modern audiences to connect with their experiences on a deeper level. However, some narratives reveal a more painful truth. Psychological trauma experienced by many slaves is well documented, but often overshadowed by their more resilient stories. Take, for instance, the account of a slave named Harriet Jacobs, who authored Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Her narrative exposes the sexual exploitation faced by enslaved women, offering a haunting yet vital perspective that is frequently marginalized in broader discussions of slavery. Jacobs' story serves as a poignant reminder of the unique struggles faced by women, demonstrating that the fight for freedom encompassed not just physical liberation, but also the reclamation of dignity and agency. The stories of resistance also emerge powerfully from individual narratives. Acts of defiance, such as running away, or more subtle forms of rebellion, such as sabotaging work or preserving cultural practices. These accounts challenge the stereotype of passive submission. For example, the story of Frederick Douglass, a former slave who became a leading abolitionist, reveals how education and self-awareness fueled his desire for freedom. Douglass illustrates the transformative power of knowledge and how it can inspire resistance against oppressive systems. Interestingly, while these personal stories highlight the harsh realities of slavery, they also underscore the deep-seated connections among enslaved individuals. The bonds formed between slaves, whether through shared experiences, familial ties, or mutual support, created a sense of community that was vital for survival. This sense of solidarity is a recurring theme in many narratives, demonstrating how resilience flourished even in the darkest of times. As we delve into these narratives, it's essential to recognize their limitations. While they provide valuable insights, individual stories cannot encompass the entirety of the slave experience. Each account is shaped by the storyteller's perspective and may omit the broader societal context that influenced their lives. This limitation invites us to approach these narratives critically, recognizing their significance while also acknowledging the complexities of the historical moment they represent. The legacy of these personal narratives extends beyond their immediate historical context. They serve as vital educational tools, helping to inform modern discussions around race, equity, and human rights. By sharing these stories, we not only honor the experiences of those who lived through slavery, but also foster a greater understanding of the ongoing struggle against oppression. In conclusion, individual slave narratives are more than just historical accounts. They are windows into the human experience. They reveal the resilience, creativity, and spirit of those who faced unimaginable challenges. As we reflect on these stories, we are reminded of the importance of empathy and understanding in our ongoing journey toward justice. Recognizing the humanity behind these narratives compels us to confront our own social structures and strive for a more equitable society. The lessons learned from these personal stories continue to resonate today, encouraging us to advocate for freedom and dignity for all. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.